roadmap. I'm going to be hanging out to help moderate, help field the Q&A, make sure Zoom doesn't like gain sentience and try to take over the world, all that kind of stuff. That's why I'm here. So before I give the reins to Miss Terra, quick little housekeeping thing. Everybody do me a favor and find that Q&A box. That is where questions you want us to answer should go. So please put them in the Q&A box so that I can find them and organize them and just make it easy on me. Help me out here. Questions, Q&A box. Chat box is you. Exactly.
Jerry Maguire for the win.
The motto. Yeah, so chat box is for exactly what you guys are using it for. The hi everyone, nice to meet you, hellos, so cool, awesome, thank yous, all of that kind of stuff. Chat box. So y'all are getting the hang of it. I trust you. I think you can do this. I think we can do this too. All right, awesome. Well, that's enough of me babbling for a little bit. Hi, Terra, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. This is my first webinar through Roadmap, so I'm very excited. It will be an adventure. And yeah, let me see how to do the share screen, show you guys my slides so we can get cracking. That's not what we want. We want this. All right, Alex, is it showing what it should be showing?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Cool. Okay, so hello everyone. We're going to be diving into different elements to really help you capitalize on your exec time through consults. A little bit about me. My background is in journalism and marketing. I'm from Washington, D.C., but I live in LA now. I'm also a reader, and I've been a screenwriter for a while, and I've been a writer, but before working for Roadmap, I was a writer in the Roadmap community almost since the beginning. So I have done a lot of consults in my time. So I have both the writer perspective as well as the road crew perspective. So a little overview about what the elements we're going to be talking about today. First, as linearly as possible, I tried to organize this. So we'll be talking about editing your script, you know, lots of fundamentals that you guys are already aware of, but I did my best to create a comprehensive list. Maybe some things that you forget about, especially in the rush of like you've been writing this thing for so long that you're just kind of sick of looking at it, and then you send it to an exec for a consult or you submit it to a competition and you get feedback and you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot to like edit for this piece. Like I totally should have caught that. So we'll go over those things as well as ways to better catch those mistakes before you submit for stuff. Then we'll go over the submission form and how to capitalize on that to really help prime the exec before you even have your time together. So specifically how best to use the bio section and the note to exec section. We'll be talking about the mindset, not just your most conducive mindset to build a rapport and have good energy between you and the exec, but also understanding the exec's mindset that they're bringing to the table. You know, there's lots of industry knowledge, generally, you know, best practices that we're all kind of aware of, but just to make sure that, you know, when your nerves kick in, you still remember these things about what the exec is looking for, and you know, that they don't think you're stupid. They're not making fun of you. They want you to win. They want to be in your corner. Then we'll go over some some questions to ask. We take a deep breath. Everyone just take a deep breath, okay? I'm on camera. This is exciting, but also terrifying, but I used to do theater, so we'll breathe into it. This is an adventure. This is meant to be informative and fun and casual. I'm saying that to you as well as to myself. So we'll go over questions that are appropriate to ask the exec if you have time after notes within your consult, as well as good questions to ask while you're digesting notes so that you can be an active listener, and so you're not just like passively receiving information. And then we'll dive into the Q&A. Okay, so editing checklist, general categories, like I said, we're all aware of these to some extent, but it helps me for sure to have a checklist as I'm writing and as I'm rewriting, and before I submit it to anything, to know that I've ticked all the boxes, looking at not just typos and proper formatting, but making sure that everything is consistent, that characters have distinct voices, that everything is in active voice as much as possible. There's different perspectives on that specifically, how important is active voice. And I think the happy medium best recommendation is to do it as much as possible. It's not that you'll be docked for a couple instances of passive voice, but anywhere where possible to be an active voice, because it really, over time, slowly but surely, as you're reading a script, it definitely undercuts the momentum and the sense of stakes that you're trying to build in your writing. So you definitely don't want to stab yourself in the foot accidentally by doing that. With action lines, making sure that what you're putting in them is strictly visual or audible. I know, especially with character introductions, you want to get a feel for the person, not just how they look, but, emotionally. So really be choosy about how you do that and try to make it as visual as possible. And also, what helps with that is show, don't tell. Making sure that your character introductions, how you introduce your primary characters versus secondary characters, are different, so that it's an immediate cue to the reader of like, okay, I need to pay extra attention to these people, these characters, not so much. But making sure that how you refer to those characters is consistent throughout, and that there is a difference between the primary and the secondary. Dialogue, making sure characters have distinct voices. What I hear a lot of execs say is that sometimes they won't even look at the names when they're reading a script because they just want to be able to see, does each character have their own perspective? What are we learning from those characters, from what they're saying to us, without even having to know their names, without even that differentiation? Making sure that your style choices in terms of the use of underline and bolding and all caps to note different things, to make sure different pieces of information stand out, making sure that those are used very consistently. I see that in a lot of scripts, especially as a professional reader for Slam Dance. It's something that's very easy to underuse and overuse. So, some folks will try to use underlining for like 3 different categories of things when maybe only use it for 1 or 2. Making sure that how you do flashbacks and sequences are formatted properly and consistently. With parentheticals, also used sparingly. It's not necessarily a no-go, but generally, if you're using more than 2 or 3 words in a parenthetical, it should probably actually be an action line. So that's the ideal, even if it makes your action line go on to another line. Find a way to include that information in a very efficient way, because also just visually, parentheticals break up the flow. So you might think that it's actually a more efficient tool because you're not taking up another line on your action, but visually it's actually kind of jarring. Typos, of course, making sure that there is dialogue on every page to break up your action. So even in action scripts, making sure that your action is very tight, very clean. And even if it's just, a grunt or a no or a shit or whatever, that there's something to create a little more white space. So it's not just 1 page of strictly action. Making sure that your scene length is tight to 3 pages or less, and that you have genre and format appropriate act breaks and key page markers, depending on what your tone and your genre is. So definitely, hopefully everyone does this, but whatever your comps are for your current project, making sure that you find scripts either for those comps or very similar movies, tone and genre wise to what you're writing, to really study the pacing and the formatting and how they do it. So you don't want to be a copycat, absolutely not, because people pick up on that, and you want to have your own voice, but it's a really helpful tool to just learn, like I said, the pacing of things, you know, how they do action lines, how they make it poetic versus efficient, how they make things stand out. Okay, now this is an editing checklist specifically for efficiency. This is really, really important, not just to make your script polished before you submit it to execs and competitions and the like, but it's a really helpful tool in order for you to know, like, are you on track with your character arcs and act breaks and key scene or key page breaks? You know, are certain threads needing more fleshing out, that sort of thing. So if, you know, depending on your genre, if you write like a crisp 85 pages for a rom-com and you're like, oh, wow, this is really clean, like you actually have, you know, a couple more pages to play with. So maybe something isn't necessarily missing from the script, like as harshly as the word missing, but could definitely use some more fleshing out. So with action lines, you know, the standard that I've heard that a lot of the books say is like 4 lines, but the cleaner the read, the better. And so if you can find a way to be precise, yet precise and elegant, yet very efficient in your action lines, that is the ideal. So 3 lines or less is maybe, you know, something to aim for to make your script as clean of a read as possible. Keyword repetition, that is a big pet peeve of mine, and I've heard it from a lot of readers and execs. So keyword repetition, whether it's you know, not a name, but if it's a location or just a term, like saying chair like 5 times in the same little paragraph of action, feels very redundant and not unnecessary. And if you're repeating keywords through your dialogue, that's not good either. It's definitely used as a tool. Repeating a phrase or a phrase or a key piece of information is definitely used as a tool in scripts, and that's good. But when you do that, it should be clear that it is for a very intentional purpose. It should not look accidental, and it should not feel redundant in the read. It should be clear from what it is that, like, okay, you know, this is going to mean something to our main character. This is going to mean something to our story in this first portion of the script. And then it's going to still mean something, but a little bit different by the time we get to the end of their journey, or later in the script when it's repeated, it's going to take on a whole new meaning. So definitely use that as a tool, but be very deliberate about how you use it. Making sure that in your action lines and in your dialogue, there isn't repeat information. Dialogue should be 5 lines or less. Like, of course, it's okay to have some more, not monologue, but a little bit more explanatory dialogue. But once again, that should be very intentionally used. It should not be the same as on the nose dialogue or like placeholder dialogue. It should be used as a tool, and it should be clear from what it is you're saying that it's important and that it was done very intentionally. So also with dialogue, making sure that it's not on the nose and that there is subtext where appropriate for your characters and your genre, and making sure that no matter what genre, no matter what time, what place, what age of character, that it is very grounded in reality. So even if you're, you know, building this big sci-fi world, that the terminology and that the dialogue you use is very grounded for that time and for those characters in a way that feels authentic to us here on Earth in this current time. Okay. Ways to catch more errors. Print it out. I cannot say this enough. Print it out. in journalism, in marketing, you know, even in this day and age where everything's done and printed on the laptop pretty much, we would still print it out. Like I would print it out, make edits, then go back to my computer, make more changes, send it to my editor. My editor would print it out and make changes. You just catch so much more that way. Because otherwise, you know, you've read your pages a gazillion times. Your mind fills in what you know you want it to say. So you're just too close to it sometimes to catch mistakes like that. So print it out. At the very least, read it out loud. You know, especially with dialogue, that is so key. That is so helpful to making sure that you have subtext, making sure that it's grounded, making sure that you don't have word repetition, that it's not too long. And also when you're editing, I suggest choosing one category, one specific type of edit that you're going to do at a time. Because even if you print it out and you're trying to edit everything all at once, you're still going to miss stuff. Your mind is going to automatically lean towards more kinds of edits than others, and you're going to miss out on some things. Another option is to always, you know, submit to proofreading services or having a trusted fellow writer proofread for you, especially if you're in a writer's group or through people that you've met in roadmap courses that you've been a part of. You know, definitely use that as a resource. You know, I wouldn't worry too much if whether or not the person writes in the same genre or format as you, maybe the same format, but genre less so. But just making sure that you know, someone you trust to actually do that for you and that you are willing to reciprocate. Okay, so next I want to dive into some examples of pages from scripts I've read, not through roadmap, of examples of edits that should have been made that really would have helped the pace of the read. And, you know, hopefully you're reading lots of scripts to help you hone your craft and help you learn specifically for your tone and genre that you are working on at any given moment, how to improve your story and get new ideas, like technique wise, not for actual story. But, you know, actually becoming a reader or reading lots of scripts in a short period of time, you really see how these lack of editing certain things really builds up, not in your favor in a read. And these things add up and they slow down the read and they undercut the pace of the story and the sense of stakes. So like in this example, you know, this writer is addressing the reader, which some people definitely do. It's not common, it's not recommended, because it takes the reader out of the story and it cuts through that fourth wall. So if you're going for a more casual tone in your story, if you want to address the reader, if that feels like that's important to you, then have a moderator and be really deliberate about who that character is and placements of that in your story. But maybe that's a better tool for you than actually addressing the reader in your writing. What this writer also does is says, yep, our worlds come together. So that's not necessary to make the conclusion for the reader of what's happening, to call out what the reader already knows, what the reader is already thinking. Okay, so in this example, this is a sample of a writer who primed what they're about to say. So it's redundant information where the writer says, Liko shenanigans only get weirder, and then in a parenthetical says, out of options, selling it to Randy. And then in the dialogue, isn't he just the funniest? Like by the time we get to the dialogue, you know, that's what we really need. And that's what effectively tells us what's going on. So we don't need the pretext, because by trying to do that, not only is it duplicating information, but it's also like you're trying to sit in the theater next to the viewer and go like, did you get it? Did you get it though? But did you get it? And we don't get to do that. And it's very annoying. So both for a viewer and a reader. So yeah, just it's a common mistake. I myself caught some of those mistakes in my script that I was re-editing recently. So it's a common inclination, but just something to really look out for before you submit for consults and things. Okay, so this is a full page of action. It could definitely be tightened up. There's a lot of passive voice. There's a lot of she's looking panicked. She sits down. She looks over. She holds the knife. She gives him a long look. So not even playing with sentence structure and mixing that up. And it's not even an action script. So this definitely slows down the read. And, you know, even if it's like simple information, it's still really, really hard to get through. Okay, so this is an example of a lot of word repetition and kind of very steppy dialogue. When I read this scene, I remember thinking like, this could be so exciting. Like the tension could be really high in this scene between these characters, but just the way that it's written actually falls kind of flat and reads very steppy and over-explained. So yeah, but, you know, I hope this is helpful for you guys, that it's a visual representation, because you can know all these things in your head and go like, yes, this is important. This is what I need to look out for. But sometimes until you see it in someone else's work play out, you don't really realize the impact that it has on your writing when an exec or a professional reader is reviewing it. Okay, now in this example, specifically, I was thinking about the scene headings. So as you guys probably know, a lot of scenes are not shot in order when, you know, your movie or TV show is actually being made. So while you are not supposed to be writing a shooting script, that is very different, shouldn't even be worried about that. It is important to be conscious of the fact that scenes are hardly ever shot in order. If ever, maybe. So really making sure that your scene headings are specific and, you know, like for instance, instead of saying yard, saying like so-and-so's yard, and just giving it more of a specific place so that we know it's already associated with a specific character or a pre-existing location, just another part of that location. Woods also, and then another part of the woods. So what's the difference between woods and another part of the woods? Are the first portion of the woods, are they scary? And the second portion of the woods are not scary? You know, are they lush? Are they near water? That sort of thing. Okay, so in this scene, you know, they're debating what to do. They're going back and forth. And while there's definitely the rule of threes that you could argue could be applied to this of like, what should we do? Here's an option. No, that's not a solution. What about this? And going back and forth, it actually undercuts the sense of stakes that they're trying to set. It reads as redundant, and it doesn't really show much about these characters either, because like, we probably already, you know, they could just say, you know, it's top secret, we can't do anything. But like, even just saying that, it's like, okay, well then how dire of a situation are you in if that's your chief concern, is that it's top secret, we can't do anything? Then the situation must not be that dire if that's a point of defense that you're bringing up. Okay, moving on to the submission form. So a couple of admin things that are just really helpful. If you have a name that you use, either a middle name or a pen name, please be sure to include both the names that you use on your form, because I see a lot of times someone will order under one name and then a form comes in under a different name, and it's not an immediate connection that they're part of the same transaction. So that's just really helpful for us here at Roadmap. Also making sure that the phone number that you put on the form is the actual phone number that you want to be contacted on, not just your like placeholder phone number for when you sign up for things and they ask you, in case of emergency, who should we call? That sort of thing. And for Skype, if you're international, your Skype name is different than your email address. So, often when we use the term username, that refers to your email address, but not with Skype. So the best way to actually find out what your Skype name is to log into your account and like go to your profile where you see your status, whether it's like green, yellow, or red, I believe. And that's where it should tell you what your Skype name is. So it might look something like james.earl.jones32 or, whatever. Oftentimes there's periods and there's dashes as part of the name. When to resubmit? When is that appropriate? Okay, I want to debunk this myth right here and now. So our policy is that there are no resubmissions because the script gets submitted so quickly to the exec. And if they have a time range that is appropriate for them to read the script and get back to us about when they want to get scheduled with you. And so if you're trying to resubmit within that time, it really puts a bad taste in the exec's mouth towards you because it's an extra ask, and that's not actually how the industry works. Like you get one read, you get one ask with any individual that you're meeting, that you're associated with, if they've offered. So the exception to the policy of we don't accept resubmissions is that if an exec is taking their sweet time, if it's been like 6, 7, 8 weeks and we haven't heard anything from them, you haven't heard anything from them, and there's no word about when they can get scheduled, then you can submit a rewrite. And that's definitely appropriate in that case because they haven't held up their end of the bargain time-wise and haven't been communicative about it. The next thing related to that is please be strategic about when you make changes to your script, knowing that you have several consults pending. I know it can be frustrating if you've signed up for several at a time and maybe 2 happen really quickly and then 2 are taking longer. But like I said, by adding in edits and revising your script before your consults have had the chance to take place, it actually puts a bad taste in the exec's mouth, makes them feel like this is an extra ask and now you're pushing them. And so you don't, why do that before you've even had a chance to talk to them? So please be strategic and timely about when you make your edits. And looking at the bio section, so the bio is not the same thing as your screenwriting resume. And Joey Tuccio, our CEO, he does a great clinic as part of, I think, the marketing intensive within the Career Writer program to really, help you craft a bio that you feel comfortable and confident with and conveys what you want to convey in a way that the exec knows to recognize, that you can use for almost anything screenwriting related. But just a few notes about that here. Make sure that it's short, that it's in third person. Counterintuitively, the more competitions you list, it actually works against you, because if you list that you've ranked, that you've been a finalist or quarterfinalist or whatever in however many competitions, then the exec might think, well, like, oh, well, if this script is so great and if this writer is so great, why hasn't it been picked up yet? And if you also say like, hey, this script has been optioned by so-and-so, or, I have a producing partner or whatnot, what that says to them is like, okay, this isn't fresh off the press. This isn't a diamond in the rough that I'm going to find. Like, this has already been circulated out there and I'm not going to be the one to bring it to light. Looking at the note to exec section, think about the questions that you have about your script, like the editing things that you want to know more about. Like, okay, like I tried to do this with my script, but did it come through? I'm wondering if this character's arc is effective. I'm wondering if this pacing works for the genre because it's a little unorthodox, or whatever it may be. This is a great place to put those questions. I wouldn't make a long list. I would maybe pick like 2, 3, maybe 5 maximum if they're short, but I rarely see writers do this, rarely see them capitalize on this space. You know, sometimes writers will put a note like, hey, can't wait to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to your edits, which is great. That's so sweet. But that's not as, that's not as powerful for you in the setup of your call as giving the exec some guidepost questions to kick off your notes session. But another thing that you could put in there is whether or not you're repped, if you plan to submit this script to a contest, or if, you know, a producer or a financier is waiting on it, because that kind of helps them be clear about what your goals are for this project. So you're not giving them an ask, you're just letting them know like where you are with this project. Okay, diving into understanding the exec's mindset. They already know what you ideally want from them. Like, wave your magic wand, right? Like, we all want to be repped. We all want the validation. We all want someone to say like, this is amazing. I'm gonna take this to my boss right away. You know, we would love to option this. Like, that is music to our ears, right? But with consults, that is not your end game. That is not the goal that you should keep in the forefront of your mind, because a lot of factors go into that stars alignment moment. It's not just about how strong your script is. You know, do you and the exec get along well? Do you take notes well? Can they take you home to meet the parents, so to speak? But it's also, you know, so many factors like, does your script actually match their current niche, so to speak? Do they already have something in their slate that your script is really similar to? Are they trying to change the tone of their slate and there's just no way that you could know that they're wanting to go in a different direction, you know? Or is your script too similar to something that's already been made semi-recently? So you just never know with that sort of thing. And they assume that you think your script is amazing. So I've definitely made this mistake before in my consults where I know in my head what questions I have and what my weak points are in my script. I don't necessarily know how to fix them. That's why I want to do this consult with this exec. And then the exec goes like, oh, you really need to clean this up, or like, this didn't make sense. And I go, I know, that's why I'm here. And that obviously comes off as defensive. And the exec would have known what those goals were and what those concerns were if I had put them in the note to exec section in the form, to help prime them for what I was already aware of and what I wanted to focus on. So knowing this about the exec, I know it's a tough truth. We don't want to think about this, but it is just the truth. It is safer for the exec to say no to you than it is to say yes for their career, because hitching their wagon to you is a gamble. And so, yes, the stakes are high, and there is a list of requirements that they're looking for, but also don't get disheartened, because even if you match those requirements, you know, there are still slate issues, timing issues, budget issues, you know, how they want to frame the niche for their company, and so to speak. So keep those things in mind. So yet, even though it is a risk for them to say yes, they want to. They are hungry for new content. They want to discover the next best thing. They want to find a story that makes them feel something that really resonates with them, where they go like, oh my God, you know, my boss is going to love this. This story is going to solve a problem. So kind of like when you're applying for a job, you know, kind of think about your script in a similar way of like, does my script solve a problem? Does my script fill a void for this company, for this marketplace, for this time, whatever? Does not just the story as a whole, but your tone, your personal experience, all of that good stuff. So I hope that's helpful. And, you know, one way to really make sure that your script is resonating with the execs you submit it to is making sure that your universal theme is really strong. And of course, you can have really exciting action, really crazy, you know, oh my gosh, stuff happen in your script, but we have to first and foremost be invested in your character. That doesn't mean that the character needs to be likable, but we need to see ourselves in some capacity in this character. We need to see like, oh my God, they're in such a shitty situation. I want to see them get out of the situation. Or like, oh my God, like, you know, they're kind of a jerk, but they're doing the best they can. Like, I want to see them grow. So making sure that the universal themes are evident, not just that you've ticked the boxes, but that, you know, through your dialogue, through your subtext, that it's really, really clear. And I know sometimes too, I'm you know, guilty of this as well. Like, we try to have multiple themes to our stories because there's so much we want to say, and there's so much that we think is important. But actually, you know, a key marketing principle that I would tell my clients all the time is that when you try to appeal to everyone, you actually appeal to fewer people. By taking a stand and being really simple about your message and just like staying in this lane of what your messaging is, you attract more people. And so don't be afraid of, you know, don't think like, oh my God, you know, I have to have multiple themes, otherwise no one's going to get it. Or I want to have multiple themes. You know, I understand that inclination totally, but it's actually more effective to really meditate on like, okay, what is the through line of all the themes that you are trying to convey? What is the foundational theme that is most important to get? Because if you try to layer it too much on purpose, then the core theme actually gets lost. So to recap, the 3 major things that execs are thinking about and looking for when they're meeting with you and talking about your script is, do you have a well-written, unique story? Like, is your skill evident on the page? Also, not only can you take notes well, but can you implement them and can you build upon them? Can you be spontaneous? Can you be collaborative in the moment? Or are you the type that it's like, okay, I need to take this, I'm going to digest it, I'm going to go over here by myself, and then I'm going to come back with rewrites. And so that's definitely common. That's not necessarily a red flag, but what's impressive is to be collaborative in the moment and to demonstrate that, like, yes, I'm going to take what you say and I'm going to run with it. I'm not just going to do what you told me to do, but I'm going to make it my own in a way that's still effective. And then lastly, are you a writer that can be taken home to meet the parents? You know, are they confident that their boss is going to get along with you, that their boss is going to want to put themselves behind you? You know, are you someone that they can have a long-term professional creative experience with? Because this is such a process. And I know you've probably heard it before, but like, not only with, you know, getting a manager or an agent, but also with the executives and the companies that you work with, the production partners, like it's like a marriage. You are in it for the long haul. Even if things go smittenly well, best case scenarios, your project is going to take forever. That's just how it goes. So they're really looking for, you know, are you professional? Are you good in a room? Are you grounded and communicative? Are you present? Are you collaborative? Can they take you home to meet the parents? Okay, scene of scenes. I love this scene and this movie so much. If you don't recognize it, this is from Big, Tom Hanks. I think it came out in 1988. His character is named Joshua. And so a recap of this scene, because I think this damn well near perfectly exemplifies the exec writer mindset that you don't want to have, an exchange that you don't want to have. So in this scene, you know, Josh is newly adult and he is in this toy launch meeting, and this guy named Paul, who's like the jerk face of the movie, he's giving this presentation on this new toy launch. And, you know, he's got all the stats and this data, and he's really excited, he's all professional, and like everyone seems to go for it. And then Josh is like, I don't get it. I don't get why this is cool. And that is every writer's worst fear, right? Like that is just crushing. Like you put all this work into the story, and then, you know, this person who's an expert in this genre or whatever doesn't like it or doesn't get X that you're trying to do with it. And that's just crushing. But what you have to understand is that when an exec gives you a note or says like, I don't get it, and pushes back on like why you did something and says this isn't, like, X part of your story isn't working, they're not targeting you. They're not accosting you. They're not opposing you. They are for the best idea. I know they sound similar. I know it feels very similar. And like, what's the difference? Emotionally, what's the difference? But they're actually very different. So in this scene, once Josh says like, I don't get it, like he proposes like, what if instead of a building, like that's so boring, like what's fun about playing with a building that can turn into a robot? Like what if it's a bug? What if it's a dinosaur? And then someone else goes in the room like, oh my gosh, we could make them collectibles if they were different bugs, if they were dinosaurs. And then someone else goes, oh my gosh, then we can make dinosaurs and bugs for girls, and that could open up a whole new market for us. And before you know it, like the whole room is buzzing and excited about this idea, except for Paul. Because it was his idea to begin with. It was his launching pad. But Josh took it and ran with it. But he was so frustrated that his idea, exactly how he saw it, isn't what everyone got excited about, that he just shut down. He didn't want to be part of the collaborative process. And he saw Josh as the enemy, when Josh is just like, I just want to make this the best it can possibly be. So know that that is your exec's intention. Like, even if it feels curt, even if it feels frustrating, that is their intention. They're bringing their own experiences, their own filters to the conversation when they read your script. So they're going to pick up on things that maybe you haven't thought about, or maybe you have, and maybe you made an intentional decision as to why you didn't include those things or why you didn't expand upon them more. But just know, that there's earnestness about it, and it's about coming to the best idea. It's not about egos. It's about making something together. And so this scene is like, perfectly exemplifies to me like the Spitfire sense of collaboration that is required in making a movie. And I know it is so hard, because especially if you're a diehard introvert, like going from the solitary experience of writing your script to then handing over your baby and having someone give feedback on it and like say like, I don't get it, or like, you need to fix this, or take out this thing that you thought was really important, and you don't have to take that note, but try to find the note behind the note. Okay. We've kind of shifted into the your mindset territory, but to expand upon that even more and loop back to something I was talking about before, I say on this slide, feedback and guidance, not winning, building a connection and collaborating, not winning. So what I mean by winning is the, end goal that we all dream of. Like, that is winning. That is the end point. That's what we're all wanting to hear, hoping will happen, working our asses off to try to achieve, right? But in the meantime, you don't want to put your blinders on and think that that is the only win, that is the only positive outcome that you want, that you're open to from these consults, because that's not really what it's about. It's about feedback and building the relationship, because that is what's going to sustain you for your whole screenwriting career. Okay, so by putting your blinders on and making it clear that that's the only thing that you're about, that that's the only thing you want out of this consult, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, you put a lot of pressure on the exec, and you close yourself off to this whole range of other positive outcomes around connection and feedback and building a professional relationship that will serve you past this project. So like dating, don't be needy, and like part of having this one-track mind, so to speak, like makes you needy. Like, whether you think so or not, whether you're like consciously aware of that, that's kind of the energy of that, is when you only have that goal and you're not actually wanting to connect, you're just wanting approval, which are different things, right? Connection, that's the give and take, building the relationship, building that rapport, being collaborative, being creative together, asking questions, that's different. So definitely be present to the exec signals. And I think, like I said on a previous slide, like if they don't offer it, don't ask. But a couple, these are two appropriate questions that you could ask is like, would you be willing to do a follow-up consult after I integrate your notes? If you hear of any writing assignments around this tone and genre, around the subject matter, I hope you'll keep me in mind. But, the end goal, the goal of this consult is really for you to practice connecting and to make a fan. That's one of Dorian, our CO's favorite phrases that she talks about in pitch prep is like, this is about making fans. This is about building connections with people because you don't know where they're going to be a few years from now. You don't know what company, what genre preferences they're going to have at that time. So this project may not be the right thing for them for various reasons, but down the road, they might really like something else that you've written. So you just never know. Also in your consults, part of being present and collaborative is practice active listening. And I'll go over some questions and phrases that can help you achieve that. I also want to talk about being process oriented. Since I bolded it and underlined it, it's important. If you take nothing else away from this webinar today, please take this with you. Being process oriented versus results oriented is way more significant for you as a writer in the long term than whether or not you're an extrovert or you're an introvert. I know that it can feel very exhausting as a diehard introvert, and as an extrovert, also exhausting because this is a networking and collaboration endurance race, and especially when you're going from the hat of solitude and writing to then having to flip a switch and having a totally different mindset in order to put yourself out there and actually connect with an exec and get them to like you and your work. That's a very different thing. There's a study that was done a couple years ago about kids in schools, and it looked at their problem solving capabilities, and the results oriented kids got anxious and downtrodden very quickly. They were so focused on whether or not they were doing it right and whether or not they would have the perfect outcome that they got so frustrated, and the performance had more peaks and valleys. The kids who were more process oriented, they were more playful, they were more collaborative. They were not so obsessed about what the end result looked like. Of course, there's that phrase, like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So like, this is the non-cheesy, psychological explanation behind that, right? So being process oriented, it doesn't just mean that you are patient and that you're practical and understand the ramifications of how much of a process filmmaking is, or, with TV, but what it really means is that you are actually focused on playing and finding options, collaborating, being spontaneous. And that allows more creativity, and that fosters connection much easier than results orientation does, because then other people are able to put their stamp on the project and actually feel included. And it reduces anxiety, it reduces perfectionism, and it makes you more flexible in the journey. Okay, next thing, taking notes. Brianna Hansen from our team did a great webinar a few weeks ago, I believe, just about taking notes. So there is definitely a deep dive version of this. We're not going to do that again, but here are some do's and don'ts, some key takeaways about specifically taking notes. So don't push back on the credibility of a note or an exec. Even if it's super frustrating, you might want to scream into your pillow, like, especially if it's a moment similar to Tom Hanks's I Don't Get It in Big, because like I said, you never know where this person is going to end up. You never know if like your next project is actually the perfect thing for you two to collaborate on. So you just be as professional as possible in the face of like feeling on the spot and just like, this is so frustrating, and like, this is a note I don't agree with. So why burn a bridge if you don't have to? The next is, don't share why you made a particular choice about a note. They do not think you're dumb. I promise you, they do not think you're dumb. They know that you made the choice you made for a reason. So once you take away that fear, that assumption of judgment from the exec, that's a load off, right? Like, and that lets you be more present and be more collaborative when you're not assuming that the other person is judging you. Like, yes, they are an expert, they're the top of their game, whatever, and you want their approval and their insight. But that does not mean just because of where they are and just because you made a decision that they don't agree with does not mean they think you're dumb. The exception to that of like, don't share why you made a certain choice is you can definitely turn it into a question and an invitation to the exec on how to change it. So, but make sure that it's in earnest, don't like put on my acting hat for 0.2 seconds and say like, well, I made this choice because I was trying to do X. So like, how would you recommend I do it? Like that comes off as aggressive and defensive. And so you definitely don't want that. But if you can make it sound more casual and like they actually tapped in to something that you were already thinking about or are definitely open to, say something like, oh yeah, like I'm so glad you noted that because what I was trying to achieve with this scene or with this element is X. So I'm so glad to know that that didn't come across. Do you have any insights as to how I might be able to fix it? And you also don't want to say that you made X decision, that you did X in your script because another exec told you to. It's not that it's going to make the exec like jealous or upset or anything like that, but it basically demonstrates that you are passive in the collaboration process and that you are a receptacle of notes and that you're not really evaluating whether or not that note works for your story or not. I know in an ideal world, I'm a Virgo and a perfectionist, so I get it. Like, I just wish that there was one rule book for how to be successful in this industry and how to write the best screenplay, and that if everyone just followed the rules, the cream would rise to the top. But that's not how it works. Like, this industry is incredibly subjective. And so you might have a consult with somebody and they might give you valuable notes, but like you really don't agree with some of them. And then someone else might say something completely contradictory to what that exec gave you. So that's where you have to dig and apply the phrase of finding the note behind the note. So do show self-awareness if you say something that you don't quite mean or was accidentally defensive. I've definitely done this in a consult where I said something that I meant as sarcastic, but I could definitely tell by the exec's reply or lack of reply that they didn't get that. So I just said like, hey, that's, obviously my tone didn't come across. Can we start again? And then we both ha 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 and went on, so, and I've heard that happen in pitches too, where, if someone's pitching and it's just not going well, and then, if the writer takes the risk to just stop and go, I'm sorry, I'm babbling. This is not what I intended, but essentially, here's what my script is about, and here's why I really love it, and here's why I was drawn to it. I've seen the exec, turn around from going like, oh my God, this is such a hard thing to watch and listen to going like, oh, I really appreciate that. Like, thank you. Like, yes, it's clear to me now, like once you exhibit it, once you said it differently, like what you're about, like wish you the best. So you totally change the tone of the conversation by doing that. And I get it. We know nerves get the best of us and we say something stupid or we make a joke that doesn't land. And so instead of just bulldozing over it and hoping that it'll be fine, take the risk to go like, well, that didn't work. Reset, please. Hello, how are you, fellow human? Next thing is do ask active listening questions. So I alluded to this earlier. So the more active listening you can do, the more of a rapport you're likely to build with the exec and the more of a connection. So basically by being an active listener, that translates into a sense of like, okay, this writer is collaborative. Like this writer is paying attention. This writer is willing to be creative and spontaneous with me and is open to my notes. So you can, even if you get a note that you don't quite understand or you don't quite agree with, you can say like, like that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And it's also a great way to synthesize what the exec has been saying. So you can say, so what I hear you saying is X. And I will admit, this may seem very woo-woo to some of you, but I'm a psychology nerd and I was raised by a life coach. So now this probably makes more sense, right? So a great way to kind of synthesize what the feedback has been from the exec is to say something like, so what I hear you saying is, and then give like 2 or 3 points of kind of the synopsis of the notes that you've been hearing. And then based off of that, the exec might share even more, like saying yes and build off of that. Or the exec might say like, oh no, like that's not quite what I meant, and like be even more clear about what they were really trying to say in their note to you. And then also practicing ways to implement the note on the spot. I know that can feel very difficult and very spontaneous, especially if you're nervous or if there's a lot of notes. So definitely don't force that. But hearing the note and finding a way to propose a way to implement it, even if you don't think it's the best idea, but just being like, even you can show your vulnerability of it, like that you're fleshing it out, saying like, okay, this isn't quite right, this isn't quite what I mean, but what if I did something like this? And then the exec can take the ball and run with it, or be like, oh, not quite, but what about this? And then you can ping pong off of each other, because that is the creme de la creme. I've had this experience in a couple of consults, and just the feeling is so different, and it is so affirming because it's a whole another kind of affirmation. There's the affirmation of like, this is an amazing script, I want to rep you, or I want to produce this, or I want to share it with my boss, or whatever. That's wonderful. But then do not discount the affirmation that you get of like really jiving with an exec creatively and just person to person, and being like, yes, they see what I'm trying to do. I'm offering new ideas. They're going, yes, that's a great idea. Add that. Then they're adding ideas, and you're actually being in sync with each other. Like, that's an amazing feeling, because that's what you want on a date, right? So this is like professional dating, basically. When in doubt, so kind of like what I was saying before, like if you get a note that you don't quite understand, or that you just don't agree with, but you want to be graceful, you can say things like, that's a really interesting insight, I never thought of it that way, I'll have to play with that more. So by saying something like, I'll have to play with that more, or like, thanks for sharing, let me reflect on that, like that gives you an out to like move on to the next note, right? But you weren't defensive, you didn't put the exec on the spot, you didn't say that's stupid, or I don't understand that, or like, you clearly don't understand my script. Like you took it with grace, and you signaled to the exec like, okay, I'm ready for the next note. Okay. So if you have time at the end of your consult, or even in the first 5 to 10 minutes of your consult, these are some great questions to ask to fill the extra time after your notes. So you can ask to practice your pitch. You can share just a few log lines with them and say like, which one would you recommend I prioritize next? You can ask them, based on my log line and based on the read, like, do you think this project needs to be framed any differently? You can ask them like, when you were reading, what characters resonated with you most? What theme came out for you? Because like our previous theme conversation, of course there's going to be a universal theme, and you want to keep your story engine straightforward and simple and consistent throughout every scene. But at the same time, each reader is going to take something a little bit different from the story. And so by asking them, what stuck out to you about the theme? Like, what was the key message that came across? Like, that can really help you see like, okay, like either, okay, my theme didn't come across the way I wanted it to, or like, oh, that's an element of the story that I can play up, that I didn't even think to capitalize on. Or like, oh, maybe you made a choice not to do that, but after a couple people saying the same thing of like, this really stuck out to me, maybe that would be a wise thing to really flesh out and incorporate even more into your story. You can also ask, like, do you have any recommendations for a good home for this project? Is there a screenwriting contest that you tend to track to find, to help you find new material? What's a budget range that you would estimate for this project? Now, with that question, I think it's a good question to ask, but I wouldn't take the answer and run with it. I wouldn't, in your next interactions or with a producer or financier or in a pitch or whatever, I wouldn't take that one person's range and say, this is what the budget range is for the script. Kind of like with notes in general, I would ask a couple people that question and then see if it's similar or, kind of average out the ranges, and use that, because you don't quite want to use just one person's opinion on the budget range, but asking a couple people and noticing the trend in that might be really helpful. Also asking them, what is a produced script that you've read lately that really stuck out with you? And is there a favorite show or movie that you wish you could have been a part of? You can also ask them, what's your favorite part about your job? If you're looking to get staffed, you can ask them on a show, you can ask them a question about that. If you're interested in development or if you're interested in being a producer, you can also ask them a question about their job. But once again, like, keep that piece more general. Okay. Q&A. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. I hope it's been fun. And Alex, I'm assuming you're going to help me filter through some questions. Is that how we're going to do it?
Yep, I got you.
Cool.
I'm here to support you. Cool. All right. Well, real quick, guys, if we don't get to your question, because I imagine more are probably going to pop in. So if we don't get to your question, please do not take it personally. We're going to do our best to grab the questions that are, broad and general and that everybody can benefit from. There's a couple of specifics that we may not have time to get to. So if we do not get to you, it is nothing personal. We're going to do our best. Cool. All right. So with that out of the way, so a couple of folks have asked whether or not they can get a copy of the slides.
Oh, well, there will definitely be a document with the notes, or I'm sorry, with the editing checklist. That'll be shared for sure with the recording. I don't know about the slides, but the recording is definitely going to be shared. So you can definitely go back again and review certain pieces of information that would be helpful.
All right, cool. So let's see here. Eric asks, are there elements /hacks /tools in Final Draft you really like to use to help you get ready on final edits before submitting to an exec or reader?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer to that. I guess maybe from my journalism training, I'm just used to straight up okay, print it out, prioritize my edits, comb through myself. I'm sure there are tools to help with that out there. So if you're part of a writing group and I see some activity in the chat box, maybe someone is sharing an example right now. But I would definitely look into that. I think, sadly, there's no way to cut corners on making the edits, but I'm sure there might be some tools out there to help you find certain things. But again, I think the biggest help will be printing out the script, reading it out loud, and combing through for one type of edit at a time. That trifecta, I think, will be the most effective.
Cool. All right, let's dismiss that one. Okay, we're gonna come back to that one. I don't quite understand what that question means, so I'm gonna think on it, then we're gonna come back to it. So Ray asks, where is the balance between writing out the action versus framing, keeps moving, versus framing what happens and letting the director visualize the scene? So I think how to not overwrite, but still giving a good understanding of what's happening.
Right. So, the frustrating /fun thing about that question is that you kind of start from square one each time you write a new script, especially if you're writing scripts across different genres, because I find that I write in a couple different genres. I find that with other writers too, like their style changes based on the tone of what they're writing. So, you might write several screenplays within a drama and you find a balance that really works for you there. But then the pacing is going to be different if you write a sci-fi or an action. And so, it really takes trial and error. I wish I could say like, this is the thing that works. But, the question to just hold in your mind is like, okay, is this efficient? Yes. Yet is this also precise? Like, is this efficient and precise and very distinctive? Like, you want to use distinctive language. So using adjectives and verbs and adverbs, like being very intentional about the words that you use to communicate tone is definitely going to help you write the most efficient yet clear action lines, so that it doesn't read as like steppy or serialized.
Cool. All right. So Sandra asks, when you talk about appropriate asks, and it's okay to say, if you hear of other writing assignments, I hope you'll keep me in mind. What exactly do you mean by writing assignments? What are you asking them there?
So what I mean by that is like, especially for TV, or, let's say they get a project that, they like the script, or they have an in-house writer, but it needs to be rewritten, or a book that they're looking to convert into a screenplay, something like that. So, depending on whether it's film or TV, the ask is a little bit more specific. But, there are writing assignments out there that companies and agents and managers have. So, that's kind of a general question that can work across the formats that you're working in. But yeah, you might just want to adjust the terminology. But yeah, with writing assignments, just letting them know that this genre is what you're into. And so if they hear of any opportunities to rewrite a script or convert IP, that you hope they'll consider you.
All right, cool. So Jack asks, I only recently decided to make screenwriting my career priority. Oh, sorry, when people ask questions, the questions move. It's like they're like bouncing all over the Q&A box. Okay, so only recently decided to make screenwriting his career priority. How long should I spend focused on building up my portfolio before I start bringing scripts to execs for consults?
That is a great question. I don't think with consults, with consults versus pitching and trying to get repped, like those are three different things. And kind of with pitching and trying to get repped, I would say it's good to have a portfolio that you feel is fleshed out, that you would be happy to have people look at, because if your pitch goes well, or if you're meeting with a potential agent or management goes well, they're going to ask you, what else do you have? They want to know that you're not a one-trick pony. But for consults, that's not really the case, because in your consult, you're focusing on one piece of material. So if an exec really likes your script, they might be curious about what else you've written. So, that's a great place where you can give them the log lines of your other projects and ask, like, do you want to read, based on these log lines, is there one you wanted to read? If they asked what other material that you have. But no, I wouldn't worry for consults about, building up your portfolio before you work with an exec. But I would just make sure that when you're pitching and when you're taking meetings, that you do have some more scripts that you feel comfortable with for when they ask.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Judith has a great question. She asks, what is a good way to start off a consult? Will execs always take the lead? I think like conversation starters. What happens?
That's a good question. So, something that helps with the start of the consult, knowing how to kick it off without it feeling awkward, sharing your bio, having that be short and well written, and also your note to the exec will definitely help with that. And then a couple of the questions that I mentioned, like if you have extra time at the end, you can also ask some of those at the beginning, especially the question like, you know, what's your favorite part of your job, or what's your favorite part of working with writers? Is there a script that you read recently that you really loved? Like those are great kind of surface level, you know, jumpstart kind of questions. So yeah, just, you know, not necessarily, you don't need to ask them about their day or like, you know, what project they're working on, because maybe they can't talk about it, but you can ask them like, hey, what's your favorite script that you read recently? Or like, what's the show that you're binging right now? And then maybe a lead-in question to pivot to your script is like, what's your favorite thing about my script? Or like, what's a theme that really stuck out to you, to help you pivot into that gracefully.
All right, cool. And Mark asks, is using freeware like Celtics instead of Final Draft a deal killer?
I'm afraid to say pretty much. I mean, Final Draft is the industry standard, and while in terms of the format, like other programs may not break rules necessarily, like they are visually different. And so, you know, for execs and for readers who read scripts all day long, you know, a million scripts a week, they have, you know, so much practice doing this, they can instantly tell the difference between a script that's written in Final Draft and a script that's not. So, you know, just the most conducive, you know, point of format, like you don't even have to think about it, would be Final Draft, because you don't want that to be the thing that, you know, puts a bad taste in their mouth and goes like, oh, why is this writer using this format, or, you know, why are they using this program, because that just signals that maybe you're not in the know about what the industry standard is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. All right. So Michael asks, what do we mean when we say the note behind the note?
Yes. What, you know, that is the grand philosophical question. What does that mean? What is the note behind the note? So, gosh, I wish I could think of an example off the top of my head. But okay, let's take the movie Big, for example, with Tom Hanks that we were talking about earlier, that particular scene. What if in the scene where, you know, the boss and Tom Hanks' character, when they're in the toy store and they're talking about toys and they're about to get on the like big floor piano thing, like what if that scene was originally different? Or what if that was a scene and the exec goes like, yeah, you know, that's not working, like I don't understand the point of that. But maybe in the scene where the exec says that, maybe they start at the keyboard, maybe they start at the piano, and then they go on to talk about toys, and that's why the exec says, yeah, that doesn't work. So maybe when the exec says that doesn't work, maybe the note behind that note is saying, you haven't earned that scene yet. We need to build up to that scene. We need to build that rapport between them, because Josh, Tom Hanks's character, is talking about playfulness. He's talking about his insights to the toys. And you can see the boss think about like, oh my God, like this guy's making really good points. I'm the owner of the toy store. I'm the boss of this toy store. And I haven't even thought about that. So Tom Hanks's character is already getting him to think about play and playing differently and what playing means, so that by the time they get to the keyboard, by the time they get to the piano, the boss is actually ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helps, but that's just an example I could think of. So basically, finding the note behind the note is like, you know, what can you reinterpret from that note to make it make sense for your story? You know, so an exec might say something general like, I don't get it, or like, this isn't working. And then it's your job to figure out why. So like the active listening questions are a great way to dig deeper, to like help the exec get more specific about it. But if that still doesn't work, or if you get conflicting advice from different execs about what needs to change, then try to find the commonality between them.
Nice. Okay, cool. And then I think Nate intuited that I wasn't sure what his question meant. Followed up. Thank you, Nate. So Nate says, in the first page of the slideshow, we use the term key page markers, and I'm not familiar with that particular term. I had completely forgotten that that term was there. So,
so that is a Terra term. That is a Terra terminology for basically referring to Save the Cat. You know, what are the scene beats that need to happen by certain page breaks? You know, the Dark Night of the Soul, on the hero's journey. You know, breaking into Act 2. Just all, you know, all those points of like where certain information needs to be revealed. So that's just Terra speak for that.
Cool. All right, awesome. So Hannah has a fantastic question, which is, how do you suggest a writer become more process oriented?
It is a practice. It is a practice, but you know, using the active listening questions and just trying to be more collaborative in the moment. So maybe one way to get into being more process oriented is instead of thinking like, okay, I'm just here to listen and like, I'm just going to take the notes and, you know, try to write it all down and then go off on my own and try to figure it out. Switching that to thinking of the console as like, you know, in the moment time to play with those notes. Like, don't just accept them and go run with them in a corner by yourself. Really try to be more spontaneous with the notes and build off of them in the moment. Mm-hmm. And that'll help your rapport too with the exec. See if you can build a connection in that way by you know, queuing off of each other and ping-ponging ideas off of each other. So, but yeah, if you're, I understand, because I'm a perfectionist too and very results oriented. But one way of putting it differently is to be, you know, relationship oriented, to be connection oriented. So by focusing on actually connecting with the exec and learning as much as you can from them in that moment, and playing with whatever it is they're giving you in that moment, that helps you be more process oriented and helps signal to them that you're collaborative, which is part of being process oriented.
All right, cool. So a couple of you guys have submitted different like questions with follow-up. So I'm going to try to condense and consolidate them is maybe a better word. You can tell it's a Sunday afternoon because I can't speak anymore. Consolidate them into like a single scenario. So let's say that we've had, you know, I have had a consult. I'll be the guinea pig. I've had a consult with the exec. It went well. They, you know, like gave me their personal email address and said, send me the script whenever the rewrite is done. So, you know, obviously finish the rewrite and send it in, but then what would you advise on follow-up procedure? Like, do I just not touch it? Do I email them every other day?
Definitely not every other day. It is definitely appropriate to follow up with them. I would say wait maybe 3 weeks to a month after you've sent in your rewrite. You know, maybe if they didn't confirm receipt, like if you sent it in and they didn't reply saying thanks, like maybe after a couple weeks you can just email them and be like, hey, you know, just wanted to be sure you got this. Hope the rest of your day is going well. Because, you know, once again, when you're emailing them, and I've heard reps say this a lot too, like when you email them to be like, hey, what's going on with my script? Have you read it? Do you have any notes? Like, they know what it is you're asking. Even when you don't ask that, they know what it is you're asking. So you don't have to be that direct or be like, hey, I sent you my script 3 weeks ago. Just wondering what's going on with that. You can just say, hey, just want to be sure you got it. Or like, hey, just checking in, wanted to know if you had any questions about what I sent you, feel free to reach out. So that it's more casual and more of an invitation for them rather than like, hey, I need something from you.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, this is execs wanting to like pursue contact with you outside the scope of consults. This is not execs saying, I'd love to do another consult with you. Different thing.
Right. Very different thing.
Cool. All right. I saw a question I wanted to ask, and then somebody else asked something and it moved. Okay, so Greg asks, when is the best time to look for a literary manager? 1 completed script, 2, 3, to infinity and beyond.
I would say, at least 2 more is better. I think a better question within that is, or the key thing to note there is whether or not the scripts that you're writing are within the same format or the same genre. So if you are writing, only in the same genre for now and the same format, like you write only, comedy pilots, let's say. So if you have like 2 to 3 comedy pilots, I would say it's appropriate to look for representation. But if you have 2 or 3 scripts and one's a feature, one's a pilot, and maybe both of them are genre or both of them are in the same genre, but they're across different formats, or like you have several different features, but they're all in different genres, that's a little bit more tricky. So I would say, try to get at least a couple scripts of the same format and of the same feature in your portfolio before you look for a representation. Because a rep is going to want to know that you are an expert in X field. So if you can exhibit that you have more than one idea in X field, in X avenue for your screenplays, that's the ideal.
All right, cool. There was another one. Oh, that might be fun. We'll end with that one. Okay, Jonathan, I'll come back to you. Where did it go? Oh my gosh. I love that you guys are so engaged and asking so many questions, but now I can't find things. Oh, okay, awesome. So Cassandra asks, what are the best questions to ask myself when I'm choosing an exec to read my project?
That's a good question. I would definitely look at, what have been some of their key notable projects that they've produced recently. I would look at what are the themes that they really like. Usually on the pitch pages, those are especially listed for the exec. So even if you're not ordering a pitch, that's a great place to look at, what they're looking for a consult when you're deciding between execs. So looking at what are the themes that they like, whether it's female-driven, young adult, action, adventure, coming-of-age stories, those sorts of things. So really pay attention to that, and also the budget range. Yeah, and also maybe look at what they've been a part of even at their past companies. So like look at like if you look up on IMDb, look at what company did they work at before and maybe see, what sort of projects that company worked on. But yeah, it's so hard. Like they definitely have, they have their corporate preferences, they have their individual preferences, but also just the timing of when they come across your script, and does that script resonate with what their company is trying to do, or is it too similar to something they already have on their slate? That can be frustrating, I know. But in terms of deciding between 2 execs, definitely look at those factors. And you can always email me. You can always email Joey and Alex and us on the team to help make a recommendation.
All right, cool. And then Louis has a question sort of about like uh, etiquette for closing these consults. So he is asking at the end of a consult, do you suggest we use a little more of, he says a hard sell, but like a little more active uh, language, like I can send you a revision incorporating this feedback, or kind of a softer, oh, thank you so much for your feedback and thank you so much for your time, and then wait for them to offer that up?
Yeah, I would definitely say a softer close, because like I said before, wait. If they want to read or rewrite, they will ask for it. They will offer that. So don't be afraid that you're gonna like miss out on that opportunity if you don't propose it. Like they will offer it if they're interested. And unfortunately, it's that cliche of the Hollywood no. Like if they don't say anything, but you can definitely take the softer approach of saying like, I'm so grateful for your feedback. I so enjoyed talking to you today. Would you be open to a follow-up consult? Or if you have any other questions about my material, what else I have in my portfolio, I hope that you'll reach out through Roadmap. So definitely the softer kind of vague ask is the better approach, and make it more of an invitation rather than asking something of them.
Yeah, because you don't want to make them uncomfortable.
Right.
Because if you make them uncomfortable, they're automatically not excited about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's part of our roadmap policy, our code of conduct that, if especially with contact information that, or reading revisions of your script, like if the exec doesn't offer, then you can't ask. And that just puts a bad taste in their mouth, and you just don't want that, especially if you've had rapport, if you've gotten great notes, if they've been fairly positive in your experience together in that moment, then you don't want to sour it by putting out another ask that they're just not open to. So definitely take their lead. I know it's hard. I know it's very patience and process oriented to accept that, but the consult is for the connection and the feedback first and foremost. So trust that they will make an offer of their contact information, or or looking at a rewrite if they are genuinely interested. And you don't want to force it on them either, of like saying, hey, I'd love to send you a rewrite, and then just go yeah, sure, because they feel uncomfortable. That puts a taste in their mouth, and that's not genuine interest. So look out for that. But yeah, the softer approach is definitely the more sustainable approach for making sure that you can actually build on that relationship in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To steal a quote from Brandon, you don't want to be put in like the weird or the creepy or the scary box.
Right. You don't want to be put in the needy box. Even the most well-intentioned, very, very kind and well-meaning writers can do that accidentally. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Oh, and this also goes for reaching out to execs on social media. Please don't do that. A lot of people's social media is like for their friends and family and old high school friends, and please, yeah, don't do that. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, don't follow them on LinkedIn. Don't message them on LinkedIn. You can use their IMDb or their LinkedIn to see where else they've worked and what sort of projects they've looked on for like your decision-making purposes, but don't use it to reach out to them, because that jeopardizes any future relationship you could have with them, as well as their future relationship with Roadmap and wanting to continue to work with writers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so we're just about out of time, but Jonathan has a question that I think is just so wonderful, and so I saved it for the end. So if you didn't talk about this already, can you tell a specific personal story of an exec meeting that went well for you?
Ooh.
Fun,
Okay.
right?
So what?
Fun, right?
Yeah, that is a fun question. Okay, I'll give two examples. One, I went through the pitch prep program semi-recently, and I was working on my pitch for this one project, and I did a string of like doing several pitches with execs, and I was just going into them thinking like, okay, this is good practice, you know, I finally feel confident about my pitch, and then to my surprise, 3 executives requested my script. So that was really exciting, and I hadn't had that happen before, so that was really cool. And then, but specifically about a consult, I had a consult before I joined Roadmap with a financier. And the financier, I forget his name in this moment, but he was a part of the movie, or he financed the movie Peanut Butter Falcon, which is an adorable indie flick, if you haven't seen it yet, with Shia LaBeouf and Dakota Johnson. And he also financed the Netflix movie Mudbound, which was an Oscar nominee 3 years ago. And so I loved both of those movies. And so, you know, we were really easily able to connect on those fronts in the very beginning and nerd out about those. But then he gave me a great note and a great question about my script. And there's a mafia subplot of my script, but I really didn't want my story to be about that. I wanted to be about this young girl and her journey. And so he asked me some question about that, and I was like, well, you know, I don't want this to overshadow her journey, but the truth is, you know, this happened. Her father had to use his mafia ties to do X, and he was like, oh my God, is that true? I was like, yeah. He was like, that is amazing. Like, you absolutely need to find a way to put that into your script. And so that was a thing that I was like afraid to touch because I was afraid of the impact on the story, but he helped me come up with a way to do it very strategically that would really boost the stakes without overpowering the main storyline.
Nice.
So that was a you know, on the spot, spontaneous connection or collaboration, and that's one of my favorite things just in general, is like, you never know who you're going to meet and what someone is going to mean to you. Like, you might do a consult, you might go to a networking event, you might go to a pitch meeting and think that, you know, X is what you want to get out of it, this is why you're here, and then you meet someone who, you know, out of left field, who ends up being perfect for something else that you're working on, or gives you the perfect nugget of insight that helps you get to the next level on one of your projects. So you just never know where it's going to come from. But yeah, that was a really awesome experience to just like build off of each other in the moment. Like I was saying before, like that moment of jiving and like having ideas and ping-ponging off of each other live was really affirming.
Nice. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
It's such a fun note to end out on. Okay, cool. Well, guys, if we didn't get to your questions, please do not take it personally. There were a lot of you. We did our best. And for those of you who had very specific questions about formatting certain things, we did have another webinar a little while ago with one of the proofreaders and I think another script reader. No, was he a college? We had another webinar dealing very specifically with formatting. So if you're interested in that, shoot us an email and we can link you up with that. But Terra, this was awesome.
I'm glad. I hope this was helpful for you guys and fun. It was fun for me too. Obviously not in the beginning because I was having trouble breathing and speaking, but then I got the hang of it, and I hope this was helpful and fun, and I really enjoyed it. And thank you guys for all your questions, and I'm so glad that we got to spend Sunday together.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you all so much for attending. I'll set you all free to enjoy your Sunday or Monday or Sunday night, or whatever time and whatever day it is for you in whatever part of the world. So everybody take care, stay healthy and safe, and we will see you all in the next one.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, guys.